Hello, everyone. This is Atman Nityananda and the founder of Advaita Atma Yoga Academy, Spiritual Academy, and Self Knowledge, and of the philosophy of non duality. I have recently created an account in Substack platform so that to share my knowledge, experience, and understanding about spirituality, self knowledge, inner transformation, awakening of consciousness. And in fact, this Substack account is mostly to present my online course, which is has as a title "Inner Transformation and Awakening of Consciousness." This is what I have done for more than 33 years in my life. I have dedicated my whole life in the search of truth, and later in the achievement of liberation from the bondage created by the programming we call egoic self. All patterns, conditioning, tendencies, desires, attachments that cause bondage and, of course, suffering. My account has as name Walk the Path of Truth and Freedom. In fact, truth and freedom is my two favorable uh, concepts that also what I aspire for, truth and freedom. And I would like today to share my experience and understanding about um, freedom, what really is freedom, what kinds of freedom exist, and what is the ultimate freedom. So, because for me, without freedom, we cannot live the life fully. We can uh, live in love and peace. And of course, to reach this state of inner freedom, we must realize truth. Because as Jesus Christ said, know the truth and truth will liberate you. So, truth is a liberating factor. Why? Because truth is the highest principle of life that has this power to liberate us from ignorance and all bondage that the egoic self creates. So we have this inner being, our divine essential nature, which we call Atman or Brahman or just being, which is freedom by nature. The nature of this essential nature of all human beings is freedom, infinity, uh, peace, wholeness, plenitude, and love. So, by connecting consciously with this element we call divine essence, we experience the innate within ourselves freedom. But why we don't experience this freedom? Which is, I forgotten to say, it is always present in the timeless now. It appears that we live in space and time, which is, we could say, real from the point of view of the body and the mind, but in reality, we live in the present moment, which is timeless. This very moment I speak to you and you listen to me is the timeless now. And the timeless now, in fact, is our true nature. And in this timeless now, things happen. In the external world, sensory experiences appear, come and go. And equally, in the inner world, psychological forms appear, come and go. And what is the constant reality? It is this timeless now, which in fact is also consciousness or awareness. I use these two concepts or words, consciousness and awareness, in this with the same connotation, although sometimes they have a little bit different meaning. But in this case, consciousness and awareness is our true self. So, in this timeless now, which is in fact our divine consciousness, uh, everything is happening. And because of the conditioning of the mind, we fail to experience this innate freedom. And instead, we experience pleasant or unpleasant sensory phenomena, or indifferent for us, at least for us, because in fact, all sensory experience, or most all sensory experiences, are neutral. They are not neither good nor bad, nor pleasant nor unpleasant, but they become good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant, depending on our attitude and attachment and desire towards them. If we desire something, then this very thing becomes pleasant or pleasurable or a source of happiness, of joy. The same, exactly the same thing, the same experience for another person is the source of pain. Let's say, for example, a football match. We have, I live in Barcelona, by the way. I live in Barcelona, so we have a very great team, Barcelona. And let's say that Barcelona plays with a great team from Italy, let's say Inter. So the people that love Barcelona, when Barcelona marks a goal, they are very happy. But on the other hand, the fans of Inter are unhappy. So what happens is the same thing for all, all those that they are in the stadium. But for those that are favor of Barcelona, when Barcelona marks a goal, they are very happy, and the ones that are with Inter very sad or disappointed. So the experience of life can be pleasant, pleasurable, or joyful for us, depending our attitude, in an attitude and conditioning and programming. Another example for it is to have a child. For most of people want a child, but there are some like me. I don't want a child. So to have a child is not okay. If by accident would have a child, I would be also happy, in my case at least. But I don't want to have a child. And there are people that they are crying to have a child. And if they cannot create a new human being, they are so disappointed and sad and etc. etc. So the event in itself is not bad, not good, not pleasant or unpleasant. So in what shows us this fact that abundance and freedom is something related to our psychological state, conditioning, and this is the most important factor in our life to live in freedom or bondage. As I said a little bit before, our essential nature is freedom in itself. It's freedom. That's why when our mind is consciously connected with this inner silent space of consciousness, we experience freedom. It's like if we put our head on a warm uh, heating machine, we experience warmness. If we stay under the sun, we experience this warmness of the sunlight. If our mind connects consciously with our divine essence, we experience plenitude, freedom, peace, and beauty. There is no other way. This is a fact. The point is that it's difficult for minds that are very strongly conditioned by rajas and tamas qualities of life and by tendencies, habits, attachments, desires, passions, etc. It is difficult, these people, to maintain their mind in their center, in the heart of existence, where silence shines, and without an effort. Because effort, when we do a lot of effort, at least, it creates a vibration, an agitation that somehow veils this inner freedom. So, what is needed is a mind that can calmly and without any special effort abide in this inner silent space of consciousness. Then freedom is experienced. The more our mind is calm, the more at the emotional and mental levels and intellectual level as well, when the mind is calm at all levels and calmly rests in the inner silence, we experience freedom without limits. But when the mind is agitated, this freedom is there, but it is veiled by the agitations of the mind, emotional agitations and mental agitations. Moreover, the conditioned mind by nature always is, most of the time, is extroverted. So it wants to experience pleasurable and unpleasurable experiences. So this is another obstacle to experience the innate freedom. And this is the ultimate freedom a man can reach. But the point is, without liberating our mind from all conditioning, we cannot experience this innate freedom fully and constantly and clearly, fully, constantly, effortlessly. So real bodhas and freedom exist in our mind. And there are, we could say, other kinds of freedom. The freedom, our true nature, is the ultimate and absolute freedom. Nothing can destroy this freedom of the consciousness. But also we have freedom or kinds of freedom related to our psyche, to our mind. For example, it is freedom to remain, in fact, my mind or our mind, remain calm, serene, tranquil in every situation, although happens something that can cause anger. For example, there is a emotional aggression or something that one person did something bad for us, an emotional aggression, um, pressure, emotional pressure, whatever may be. So if we can remain calm, maintain calmness, emotional, mental calmness, this is a kind of freedom. And there are, we could say, two possibilities. The one is that anger continues existing in our psyche. However, we have worked with this anger and we are capable, the moment that something happens, to avoid identification with anger and avoid an intense expression, manifestation of the anger, and lose ourselves in the anger itself. So there is a possibility. This is also freedom. Freedom is to avoid identifying ourselves with the mechanical reaction that happens due to some happening situation. Greater freedom than this is to have worked a lot with this tendency we call anger, to the degree that this tendency have been almost eliminated from our psyche. And what happens in this moment of a trigger that can provoke anger to manifest in our psyche, it does we remain calm, our mind, of course, because as consciousness is always, we could say calm, although it's not correct, because its consciousness is beyond calmness and agitation. It's something indescribable. So, if we have worked deeply with the tendencies, especially with anger tendencies, and it is so deeply or um, diminished from our psyche, then we can find ourselves in the same situation that usually triggers our anger and will remain calm. This is freedom. More, we would say, a greater freedom. So we have first the state in which we are identified completely or almost completely with the reaction. So there is the trigger, there is the reaction of our mind at all levels, mental, emotional, intellectual, energetic, of course. And we are easily identified with this reaction, and we take this reaction as ourselves. This is total identification and delusion. And this is bodhats, because we have to suffer the results, the consequences that this identification with anger causes and what anger itself causes. We have to live it. So the first kind of freedom arises from having uh, developed the capacity to avoid this identification with anger and to remain, we could say, as detached observers of the anger. And also, this second state can have 3-4 degrees, depending on the capacity we have developed. That means we can, if we are very advanced practitioners, we can notice the manifestation of anger in the very uh, as soon as anger arises. So it becomes very easily to avoid identification and make it subside, etc., etc. And if we have not developed this capacity, then the reaction of anger can be a little bit more stronger. And then we need to do something more to avoid identification with anger and make it subside. But this is also freedom. The first, in the first case, we are very capable. We are in a state of attentiveness and self-awareness. That means consciously abiding in the inner silence. So we are capable to notice the reaction of anger in the very first step. And by paying fully attention on it, this anger cannot sustain itself and subsides. This is a very high capacity. So we are free. This is freedom. The freedom to avoid identification and live this very moment through anger as the anger. So we live as a conscious entity, not as anger this very moment. The second state is that we are not so well prepared, so we cannot catch the anger in the very first step of its manifestation. It becomes a little bit more obvious, more or stronger. Then we have also the capacity to notice it, to step back, to maintain a distance, but we need to make a little more effort to manage this situation so that to avoid the identification and make the anger subside. This is also freedom. And we have the more advanced, the most advanced state where anger is completely or almost completely eliminated. In this case, there is no anger reaction. The trigger is there, the situation is there, but we remain as empty space. Nothing can affect our mind. So this is freedom also. And the ultimate freedom is the freedom of our divine nature, the experience of the freedom of our divine nature, which is formless existence and consciousness. Means that this formless existence is the light that enables itself to be conscious of itself. This is the ultimate freedom. There are other kind of freedoms related to our mental, emotional, intellectual levels. So, for example, if it is usual, the fear to express our opinion about something. Let's say we are in our job and we have a meeting, many people there. So, because of fear, we don't dare to express loudly our opinion. This fear creates this bondage to express what we think about this very specific issue. So by working with this tendency we call fear, and by understanding deeply the situation, and by dissolving this energy of fear related to this situation, I mean to express our opinions publicly, then this is a kind of freedom. Fear creates bondage. I cannot express myself to tell what I want to tell because of fear. fear what others will think about me, that what I will say, it will not be accepted or approved or admired or recognized. So I prefer to keep silence to avoid any of these things that only in reality happen in our minds. The real bondage is our conditioned mind, not the mind, as many teachers may say. It is the conditioned mind. The mind which is free from conditioning of any kind, that means from fear, lust, greed, anger, hatred, is the instrument through which we can express our deeper aspirations and love and freedom of our divine essence, etc., etc. There is no life without mind. But the problem is that our mind is very strongly conditioned by different kind of conditioning in the form of passions, defects, flaws, low or negative emotions, patterns, social patterns, family patterns, programming, etc. This is the problem, and this is the bondage. When through inner work we achieve to liberate our mind from this conditioning, then we can live the freedom, even at the level of the mind. So instead of reacting with fear or insecurity or aggressiveness or anger or irritability, we remain open in a state of openness, of harmonious vibrational frequency without uh, leaving the frequency of the program of the egoic self. This is freedom. So if after working with this fear to express my opinion publicly, I have managed to eliminate this energy of fear, of course, to understand the situation at the intellect level, and also to abandon some belief related to this, then I experience the freedom related to this inner conditioning and the situation. So after working with this tendency, I can express my opinion publicly wherever I am without any hesitation, without any insecurity, fear, etc., anxiety. This is freedom. It is also freedom to express my emotional state. Usually, we feel vulnerable to say that I feel angry, I feel insecure, I feel fear, I experience fear, I experience um, frustration, disappointment. We have difficulty to say this even to our partner, especially if these emotions uh, are related to some situation related to our partner. So we have not the courage to say, to express what we really feel, because also from fear also in this case is the most important element that creates borders, because we think, because of fear, that if we express what we really feel, it can be used, for example, from by our partner, and to use this in a way that can harm us or hurt us. But in fact, there is nothing exterior to us that can hurt us and makes provoke problem to us, emotional problem, I mean, or psychological in general. Everything we experience is directly related to our conditioning. This is a false understanding, attitude, behavior of the conditioned ego or mind that shifts the guilt to others. So, I mean, what I experience now, it's not my fault. It's not something that has to do with my inner state or psychological programming. The others are the ones that make me feel like this. And this is one of the fundamental um, false beliefs that maintain us in this delusion and in bondage. Because the moment we blame others for our inner state, we become victims, and then we do not take responsibility of our inner state. That means we do not do anything about it. Because what creates this inner state is others. So the others have to change. The situation must change, but not me. So in reality, in this situation, this egoic pattern or conditioning or habit, whatever may be, it remains secure. It secures its existence in us because veils our understanding, perception, the clarity, clouds the clarity of our perception so that we remain blind to what really happens in ourselves and we blame others or the situation or God or life. In fact, what causes pain or borders is some psychological element in the form of emotion, of belief, of tendency, of passion, idea, pattern, habit, whatever may be, it is always inside ourselves and is, we could say, hidden in our subconscious mind, and it manifests or it comes up uh, according to the circumstances when are favorable for this pattern to express itself. So every emotional, mental formation or pattern is related to specific sensory impressions and thoughts and fantasies. So what we call trigger, it may be something we see, something we hear, a person, some specific words we hear, whatever. And these specific words or uh, sight, what we see, it is associated with this pattern, which is mostly emotional and also associated with some thoughts. And this trigger activates this pattern to come up. And if we are not trained to set back and maintain a distance, we identify completely with this pattern and we leave this very situation in the present moment through the pattern. So if we train ourselves and become capable to maintain a distance from this pattern, then freedom begins. And if we work consistently and profoundly with every pattern or every conditioning or emotion, little by little, we can diminish its energy and also abandon false beliefs, ideas related to this, so that in future moments that the same trigger or situation appears, then this tendency has not the power to express itself freely and fully, and we are also capable to maintain, to step back, to maintain a distance, psychological distance, so that to avoid identification and manage this expression, um, we could say, without uh, a, s- um, a lot of effort. It comes, the more we are trained and the more we have developed the necessary capacities to manage our mental emotional reactions, the easier it becomes for us to manage them, to notice them earlier, so that the earlier we notice the expression of a tendency, the easier it becomes to um, avoid identification and make it subside. So by through working with every unconscious pattern or conditioning, we can eliminate the energy related to this and abandon ideas, beliefs related to this pattern. And practically, this results to have a better capacity, a higher capacity to avoid identification, and also the expression of this pattern to be weaker. And we will have also the capacity to deal with it in with a very effective, efficient way, so that to make it subside. And also to develop the capacity to behave in the same situation in a conscious and a different way. As I said before, if because of fear of criticism or whatever, don't we have not the courage to speak publicly, we can do this after some time if we work seriously with this fear, which, as I said, is associated with some ideas, beliefs, and sensory also associations. It is an holistic work. It is needed an holistic work with every uh, specific tendency or pattern or programming related to our egoic self. So, because in reality, fear is the greatest obstacle that prevents us prevents us from doing what we aspire, what we dream, what we want to experience in life. So by working deeply with this element we call fear and the associated beliefs, ideas, etc., we can free ourselves from this fear, and this is freedom. Freedom is also to have the courage to act to the situation at hand, even if even if the fear is present. So if I have the willpower and the courage to act as I think it is good for me or for the others in this very moment, although fear is present in me, this is also a kind of freedom. I have the freedom to overcome this fear and act as I wish, I want. So we have this a variety this kind of freedom related to our psychological self. So the freedom to express our emotional state, the freedom to express publicly our opinion, the freedom to act against our fear, the freedom not to identify with the pattern or conditioning that expresses itself in certain circumstances. Let's say anger, let's say greed, let's say gluttony, let's say jealousy. If we have the capacity to avoid identification with this reaction or this expression, this is freedom as well. Of course, the highest freedom related to the psychological uh, to our psychological level is to eliminate totally all tendencies or patterns that create bondage. So if I eliminate totally fear, I do not, I'm not limited from fear. If I eliminate totally anger, I'm free from anger. I can uh, live each moment free from anger. If I eliminate lust, I can be in the presence of lustful images, persons, situations to remain, how to say, without any lustful reaction. I remain in peace, transparent, no reaction, no agitation. This is freedom. To have the capacity to avoid identification with the lustful reaction in the presence of something, it is also some kind of freedom. It is, we could say, the beginning of the freedom. The total elimination of each tendency is complete freedom from this tendency. And the ultimate freedom beyond all is the freedom of our divine essence. And this is the ultimate goal of or purpose of human life. And in my experience, what is the most worthy thing, which is not a thing, to aspire and live for? There is nothing more important, significant thing, which is not a thing in life, in human life, than to aspire and practice, work for its inner freedom from all egoistic tendencies, patterns, conditioning, etc., passions, attachments, and to live, to realize, and fully and permanently and effortlessly live the freedom of our divine essence. This is what I wanted to share with you about freedom. So, again, just to summarize, there is the innate freedom, always free, which is our true nature. Our true nature is freedom itself. There is no limitation. It is whole, free, peaceful, and blissful. This is our innate nature. And when our mind is consciously abiding in this inner silent space of consciousness, experiences freedom. This is the ultimate freedom. Then we have the bondage, because our divine essence is always free. The bondage and freedom related to the psychological apparatus or psychological self, we could say. So when our mind is conditioned by all these tendencies we call selfish or egoic or egoistic tendencies, patterns, and habits, we experience the bondage of this conditioning, and we fail to experience also the innate freedom of our divine essence. So we can experience freedom of both. I mean, the freedom related to psychological self and the freedom of our divine self by purifying and by eliminating all conditioning that is stored in our subconscious mind. The weaker becomes the fear, the anger, gluttony, lust, jealousy, greed, insecurity, whatever may be, the greater the freedom we experience also in the psychological level, at the psychological level. The more we become capable to step back from the conditioning and see it as if it were something external to us, which in fact, from the point of view of awareness, is something external. However, it is experience something in ourselves. So the more we become capable to avoid identifying with this expression, with every expression, and maintain a distance, this is also freedom. And make it and manage it and make it subside. It is freedom. The more easily we do this, there is a greater freedom in us, which, by the way, allows us to experience the innate freedom, which is always present as the background of our experience, but veiled by the agitations of mind at emotional, mental, intellectual levels. So by purifying our mind and heart and energy, and by weakening all egoistic tendencies, we experience less and less identification and the bondage these tendencies create, and we have the capacity to experience more and more the innate, absolute, infinite freedom of our divine essence. So what we need to do is to purifying our mind and heart and eliminate the egoistic tendencies of all kinds: jealousy, fear, gluttony, passions, greed, avarice, pride, envy, impatience, arrogance, insecurity, guilt, what else? Hatred, likes, dislikes, irritation, whatever may be. By dissolving, eliminating all these tendencies, and by purifying our mind, that means that mind becomes more harmonious, transparent, luminous, and free from intrusive elements, which are the egoistic tendencies. The more the mind is pure and free from these tendencies, the more we experience freedom at the psychological level, and the more we experience freedom, the freedom of our true or divine essence. So, although freedom is always present and absolute in our heart, our deepest place of our existence, related to our true self or consciousness, which is not a self, in fact. Anyway, we can experience this absolute freedom by purifying our mind and heart and by eliminating all these tendencies. So, what does it mean that real, which is not real in the full meaning of the word, or to say better, bondage and freedom are related mostly to our inner factory. Because when I say mind, most of you probably we associate mind with thinking, which is not correct. Mind is all these levels, aspects related to our psychological world. And for this, there is a very specific term in Sanskrit in the Advaita Vedanta philosophy, Andakarana, or the fourfold inner organ or instrument. Fourfold because it has four aspects: external mind or manas, intermediate mind or intellect, and inner mind or chitta, and the agent, the sense of I, the ego. This is the four main aspects of the inner instrument we call mind, but we associate this mind mostly with thinking or emotions, but it is much more than this. Although emotions and thoughts are of the most important expressions and functions of the mind at all levels. So, bodhas and freedom are related to mind because mind free from conditioning, defects, flaws, emotions, etc., it is the instrument to experience freedom at the level of mind and the freedom of the inner self. And the mind, which is conditioned with all these tendencies and patterns, it is the immediate cause of bodhas because we live life through this conditioning. It is an unconscious way of living, and we have to experience life through this conditioning, and worse than this, we take them as ourselves and as our conscious choices, which in reality, in fact, are not choices. It's something that happens to us without us, without our conscious will, without our concession, are automatic, mechanical, compulsive reactions. So, bodhas and freedom are mostly related to our inner organ we call mind because is the means to experience freedom at the level of mind and the freedom of our innate uh, not innate of the divine essence, which is the freedom is innate in us because it's the nature of our divine essence. So by purifying our mind and by eliminating all programming conditioning, we experience freedom at the level of mind, psyche, etc., and the freedom of the divine essence. This is what I wanted to share with you. And to do so, to reach this state of freedom, we need to devote our life to this process or inner work. It is not something we can do by doing for some time or being, how to say, like a hobby or partial practice or whatever. It's not possible. It is needed, it's necessary to devote our whole life to this inner process because the egoic self resists this inner work and transformation because as everything in life wants to live, it doesn't want to die. As we human beings, we don't want to die. Similarly, the same power acts through the tendencies, and anger doesn't want to die. Pride doesn't want to die. They want to continue living in us, and they fed themselves through identification. So the ego, which is a psychological entity, wants to perpetuate its life by expressing itself and by making us identify with it. So that to experience life identified with the ego as the ego. And this is the real bondage. When we become aware of this, and little by little we stop identifying with the creations of the egoic self in the form of emotions, passions, desires, attachments, fantasies, imagination, beliefs, ideas, opinions, little by little we work for our freedom. I mean, psychological freedom from the conditioning. And when this happens, we experience more and more freedom from all tendencies. We live without fear, without anger, without frustration, without anxiety. We live in peace and calmness and openness and joy and freedom. And also we experience the absolute freedom of our divine essence. We experience the freedom related to psychological level and the freedom ever present in our center of existence of our divine essence. I wish you peace, love, and light. And I wish you to realize this inner, ever present freedom and also be free from all limitations that are created by the strange phenomenon we call egoic self or simply ego. And especially the lower aspect of the ego. This is another topic because the ego is not, it's not as many, or some teachers say just a thought or just a concept. No, it's not just a concept. It's much more than this. So, what is really the problem of the ego is the lower aspect of the ego, which is related to rajas and tamas quality. And all the tendencies, habits, programming, patterns are that cause bondage, pain, suffering are related to this lower aspect of the egoic self, which I call Rajasottamasic ego. I wish you peace, love, and light. I wish you realize your innate freedom. And I wish you be free from all conditioning in this very life. Namaste.